The phone rang once, then again. It was almost midnight, and the city outside was wrapped in silence. In the penthouse overlooking the skyline, Alexander Reed, one of the country's youngest millionaires, was seated at his mahogany desk, staring at the glowing screen filled with numbers, contracts, and stock projections. His life had become a series of endless calculations. Profit margins, acquisitions, investments, everything had a price, even time. And he believed that emotions were just distractions that weak people couldn't control. But that night, a single trembling voice through the phone would shatter everything he thought he knew about success, control, and love. It was the voice of his 6-year-old daughter, Emma. Her tone was weak, barely above a whisper. And in that moment, 3 words, soft, fragile, and breaking, cut through his soul like glass. Daddy, it hurts. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love that can heal even the coldest heart, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, one act of compassion can change a life forever. Alexander froze. The sound of his daughter's trembling voice echoed through his head as if time had stopped. He had left Emma under the care of his housekeeper while he attended a high-profile business event that evening. She had called once before, asking him when he'd be home to tuck her in, and he had brushed her off with a short reply, saying he was busy. Now, his hands trembled as he held the phone to his ear. Her soft sobs filled the silence. Something in her tone, the fear, the pain, tore through his chest. For the first time in years, the empire he'd built felt meaningless. Without hesitation, Alexander grabbed his keys and sprinted to the elevator. The penthouse doors closed behind him, trapping his reflection in the mirror walls, an image of a man who had everything money could buy but had somehow lost the only thing that truly mattered. The city lights blurred past as he drove through the night, the steering wheel gripped tight in his hands. His mind replayed the last few months, missed birthdays, broken promises, the growing distance between him and his daughter since his wife's passing. He had told himself that working harder would give Emma a better future, but deep down, he knew it was an excuse to escape his own grief. He had buried himself in business because facing the emptiness at home was unbearable. When he finally reached the mansion, the driveway was lit only by the faint glow of the porch light. He burst through the front door, shouting Emma's name. The housekeeper rushed down the stairs, pale and frightened, explaining that Emma had fallen in her room and wouldn't stop crying. Alexander ran up, his heart pounding, to find his little girl curled on the floor beside her bed, holding her arm, tears staining her cheeks. The sight hit him harder than any failure ever could. He scooped her up gently, his voice breaking as he tried to reassure her. She whispered that she had tried to reach for the storybook he promised to read her before bed. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights were cold and sterile, the air heavy with tension. Alexander sat beside Emma's bed, holding her tiny hand as the doctor explained she had fractured her arm but would recover fully. Relief washed over him, followed by a crushing wave of guilt. He realized that the fracture was not the real pain that needed healing, it was the distance between them, the silence that had replaced laughter, and the way she had learned to live without him. For days after, Alexander couldn't shake the sound of her voice from that night. It replayed like a haunting melody every time he tried to work. He began leaving the office earlier, canceling meetings, and spending more time at home. But it wasn't easy. Emma had grown quiet, hesitant, almost distant. The sparkle in her eyes that once greeted him at the door was dim. It took weeks of gentle effort before she started to smile again. He began reading her favorite stories at night, even if she fell asleep halfway through. He learned how to braid her hair before school, burn pancakes on Sunday mornings, and laugh at his own mistakes. Slowly, the cracks between them began to mend. But guilt lingered. The memory of his wife, Lena, hovered in every corner of the house. She had been the heart of their home, warm and full of life. Losing her had left Alexander shattered, though he never showed it. Instead, he built walls around his heart and called it strength. But one evening, as he was putting Emma to bed, she asked something that broke him all over again. She said, "Daddy, why don't we talk about Mommy anymore?" He froze. The question stabbed through years of suppressed grief. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then he took a deep breath and told her stories about Lena, the way she loved painting sunsets, the songs she used to sing, and how much she loved Emma. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't hide them this time. Emma reached out her small hand and wiped his cheek, whispering that Mommy would be happy if they smiled again. That night, Alexander sat by the window long after Emma fell asleep, staring at the stars. For the first time, he prayed, not for wealth or power, but for forgiveness. Weeks turned into months, and the once cold mansion began to feel like home again. Alexander didn't just give Emma time, he gave her his heart. But life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. One winter afternoon, as they were driving back from her school play, a car skidded on the icy road ahead and crashed. Without thinking, Alexander stopped and rushed to help. The driver was an elderly man, injured and struggling to move. While others stood by, afraid, Alexander pulled him out safely and waited for the ambulance. He didn't realize Emma was watching from the car, her little face pressed against the window. Later that night, she hugged him tightly and said, "Mommy would be proud of you, Daddy." Those words, simple, innocent, and full of love, felt like a light breaking through darkness. He realized he had not just become a better father, he had become a better man. Yet, the biggest change came one rainy evening when his company faced a major crisis. Investors were panicking, shares were falling, and his board demanded immediate action. Old Alexander would have buried himself in work for days. But this time, he looked at the photo of Emma on his desk and knew what mattered more. He left the office, ignoring the chaos, and went straight home. When he opened the door, he found her asleep on the couch, clutching the drawing she had made of them holding hands under a rainbow. It had one sentence written in crooked letters, "Me and Daddy, together forever." Alexander fell to his knees beside her, tears streaming down his face. He realized the true meaning of wealth wasn't in the money he earned, but in the moments he almost lost chasing it. That drawing, that tiny expression of love, was worth more than all the empires he'd built. He kissed her forehead gently, whispering a promise that he would never let her feel alone again. From that day, everything changed. He restructured his company, introduced policies that supported parents, and donated part of his fortune to children's hospitals. He stopped measuring success in numbers and started measuring it in smiles. People around him noticed the difference, his staff, his friends, even his competitors. The cold, distant millionaire had become a man whose eyes carried kindness instead of calculation. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Lena's passing, Alexander and Emma visited the meadow where they used to have family picnics. The air was filled with the scent of wildflowers and the golden glow of the setting sun. Emma ran ahead, laughing, her arm fully healed, her hair catching the wind. Alexander stood there watching her, his heart full. For the first time, he didn't feel haunted by loss, he felt gratitude. He realized that life had given him a second chance, not through luck, but through love. He took out a small locket from his pocket, inside was a photo of Lena and Emma together. He whispered a quiet thank you to the wind, believing somehow Lena could hear him. Then Emma ran back and took his hand, smiling up at him with those same warm eyes her mother once had. They stood there together, surrounded by light, the past behind them, and hope ahead. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Subscribe to the channel if you believe that love and family are worth more than anything money can buy. Because sometimes, the smallest voice, the little girl's call, can change everything. Before we end, tell us in the comments, what does family mean to you? As the sun dipped below the horizon, Alexander lifted Emma in his arms, spinning her around as she giggled with pure joy. The world around them faded into a soft blur of colors, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself paused to watch. A father and his daughter, once broken by loss, now healed by love. And in that single moment, Alexander knew he had finally found the one thing he had been searching for all his life. Not success, not power, but peace.